Yet another example of China's thirst for resources. Dubbed Ocean Petroleum 981, this offshore oil rig is being deployed to the South China Sea, and that has caused concern among China's neighbours. This is the South China Sea. Now, under international maritime law, each state has the right to exploit and manage an area up to 200 nautical miles from its coast. That's known as the exclusive economic zone, and that's what this blue dotted line represents. But take a look at China's claim. It extends far beyond its southernmost coastline, covering almost the entire South China Sea, an area that's estimated to hold rich deposits of oil and gas. Just a week ago, there was a confrontation some 100 nautical miles off the Vietnamese coast. Vietnam accused Chinese patrol boats of harassing its vessels and of deliberately cutting cables belonging to a Petro-Vietnam ship. China said it acted within its rights. While China has never disguised its ambitious claims over the South China Sea, experts say Beijing has shown an increased willingness to defend what it deems to be its territorial waters.
The almost complete absence of conflict management or conflict avoidance mechanisms between China and the Southeast Asian claimants raises the prospect of an accidental confrontation at sea, either through misperception, miscommunication, or miscalculation. These kinds of events have a tendency to escalate into a more serious armed conflict.
A more assertive China has also contributed in part to an arms race in the region. This year's Asia Security Summit will focus on the shift of military strength from the west to the east and on resolving territorial disputes. But any negotiations with China will now have to take into account not only its economic dominance, but also its rising military influence. Florence Louis, Al Jazeera, Kuala Lumpur.
Well, to look further at this issue, we're joined now from Canberra by Carlisle Thayer. He's Professor at the Australian Defence Force Academy at the University of New South Wales. Firstly, let's look at China. Why do you think we're seeing for the first time it's sending its Defence Minister to this summit?
Well, last year, China's dream run of the last decade of winning over the nations multilaterally was overturned when the South China Sea issue blew up in its face and the most prominent actors ganged up against China. And China had been absent from this dialogue, and so now China is making an assertive attempt to come back and win over the region and win over their support for China's position in dealing with security issues.
Do you think it's going to succeed?
Well, nations in Southeast Asia don't want to make a choice between the United States and China, and both major powers have to be careful that whatever they advocate, they're not part of the problem. So they'll welcome China's attendance. The U.S. Secretary Gates has already said that's the case. And the topic of the speech is on international defense cooperation, and China is promoting it. So most Southeast Asian states want to enmesh China in cooperative defense relationships, and they'll welcome any signal by China that it's prepared to do so.
Are these disputes over tensions in territorial waters, they have been on the rise recently. Do you fear that they will lead to serious conflict?
I doubt they'll lead to serious conflict, but they pose a problem that, as your introduction indicated, that China's claim overlaps with the exclusive economic zones, and it's used civilian surveillance vessels to enforce its claim to sovereignty. That has led, again, it was alluded to not necessarily an arms race, but to the purchase of weapons by local countries where they can deny China access. If this gets out of control, we're in a situation where nations will have submarines, and they may, in certain moments of crisis, attempt to use force. But at the moment, that's not about to happen, and all we've had is two separate incidents, I should say, but they seem to be linked to a broader strategy of increasing assertiveness by China to push its sovereignty claims. And
do you think this summit is the forum where such disputes can be settled?
No, the Shangri-La Dialogue is precisely that, a dialogue. It's important because China can make a statement of policy, so can the United States. That will reassure friends. Regional states could make their positions known to these, but the most important business of the Shangri-La Dialogue is that it brings these officials together and they meet offline, privately, confidentially, and discuss issues amongst allies and Secretary Gates is certainly hoping to meet his Chinese counterpart. So the dialogue, although it has a public persona, has a very important behind-the-scenes interaction by chief officials, the people who execute national policy.
Carlisle Thayer, interesting to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us.